So welcome guys. Today we are going to start our journey on the design stuff, and we're going to be starting with this basic. We're going to be starting with this basic design here. This design, there is nothing much there, but it comes with a lot of goodies too that we've talked about. Everything that is on this design is what we've talked about in the previous classes, but I'm going to be introducing you to other properties that we're going to be using later on to lay out our content. Because anytime you are creating a design, most of the time, the way the content is going to be laid out is either you are in a row form or you are in a column form. And when you're talking about rows, this is what we call rows. Row means that you only have one row and you have multiple columns. This is what we call row here. And if you look at all of them, they are side by side. This is what we refer to as row. And you're going to be seeing the property you're going to use to do something like this. Apart from row, you can actually stack the content on top of each other. And this is what we call column here. And why is it called column is because we only have one column. So this one that have one column, we call it columns, and the other one row, we call it the row layout. So it's laying out element from left to right or from right to left. That's what we call row direction. But when you're talking about the column direction, it laid out element from top by default to bottom or from bottom to top. You can actually change the direction or you can reverse the direction. So this is what we call row here, but it always move from left to right by default, but you can actually change the stuff by reversing it to start from the right and it will move to the left. And if you look at this one that we have here, you see that this one is using what we refer to as a column here, because if you look at them, they are stacked on top of each other, because which means it's using this direction here. So the items you'll be working on later on can either be stacked like this or stacked like this, or combine the two of them together. That's what you'll be doing later on, to be combining your element. So when you have some design, the way the element are positioned, they are always stacked in this form or stacked in this form here. And when you are talking about this form that I have here, this is what we refer to as a row. So when you have it in this form, we call it row. But when they are on top of each other like this, we call it column. And this column is what we are going to be using today to do this one, because if you look at all this content here, they are stacked on top of each other. So we are going to be using this layout to arrange all these items that we have here. But later on, for some design, you see that they are placed side by side, which I can show you some of the design that is like that. I can see here, this is the row here. So if you are looking at this design, this one is going to be row here. Why is it row? It's because of the way they are stacked. So if you look at it, this is the parent here, and inside the parent we have one by this side and you have another one by this side. So they are side by side and they are moving from left to right. So this is what we call row. But some of them is going to be column, and as you can see here too, you can see the layout of column going on here. So you can have both of them together, or you can have only one, or you have all of them being placed. So here now I have this box, and at the same time I have another box here. But inside this box here, you have all this one being stacked on top of each other. So how do you do all this thing? I will explain it today. But for our design, we're only going to focus on something like this, and in the next class, which is tomorrow there, we are going to work on this so that you can see how you can place content side by side. But before you start placing content side by side, before you start jumping into CSS, the first thing you need to do is to arrange your page content, which is what we have been dealing with since, which is the HTML. So you need to have a way of arranging your content in a way that when you are applying your CSS, everything is going to be laid out correctly according to what the design is showing you there. Currently here, this design that you are seeing here, you have to arrange your element or the HTML so that it follows the structure that the CSS is looking for, so that it will be able to style it according to the way you want it to be. So when you want to do any design, the first thing you need to do is to know how to lay out your design. Layout is the HTML part. So which means you need to know how to combine all these your elements together in order for them to form what you are looking for in CSS. You don't just arrange elements anyhow. If you arrange them anyhow, you are not going to get what you expect in the CSS when you are applying some of this property. So in order for some of this property to work, you need to arrange your HTML page correctly. And if you are looking at this design here, so if you are looking at the design, if you look at it, you are going to see that we have the body. So this entire area is what is going to act as a body. But inside the body, you see that there is another container there that is holding, or there's another element which we normally call container. So anything that is holding other elements together, we call it container. So later on when you say that, when I'm mentioning container, what that means is that you have other element inside it, and that element is the one that is holding all of them together. That's what we call container, or some people will call it wrapper. So here now I'm calling it container. Container is just an element that is holding other elements together. And if you look at it here, there is a box here, and this box is the one that is holding everything that is inside it together, and that's the reason why it is called container there. So inside this box, this is how we are going to arrange our HTML. I'm explaining what we are going to do when we are dealing with the HTML. The first thing we have, which is always the first step, is to generate your HTML page. And once you generate your HTML page, you know we are going to have the body automatically here once you use our shortcut there. So you are going to have the body. So this entire box here is the body. But inside the body, we have another element that is grouping all these other content together. And this one too, we are going to be using a main element, or like the section and so forth like that, to generate them. You are going to see when I get into the coding part. So apart from this container that we have here, don't forget we have this image here. So we need image to to display this picture here. Apart from image, we need the heading text to display this name here. And apart from this, we have this subtext, which is this London. And apart from this one too, we have this text that is here. So we have this text. But normally, if you want to work on this, you don't just jam pack all these elements together like this. You group them together according to the way all these elements are moving. Look at my browser here. If you look at, there are some icons here, while some icons are here. If you look at it, two icons here, they are grouped together, and all these icons here too, they are grouped together. So that's how you are going to be working to when you are dealing with the elements that you have on a page. When you see that some elements that are in a form of a group, what you do is that you put them in a container. And that's the reason why you see that I mention container when I want to work on this box here. So if you look at it, this box is the one that is grouping all the content that is inside it together. So this means this one now is the container for everything that is inside it. Again too, if you look at all this box, it looks like everything they are grouped together. So if I want to work on this, what you have to do is to put them in a container because of the property that we are going to be using later on, which is the one that will help you to put content side by side or to stack them on top of each other. In order for you to stack content like this, whether you want to put them side by side or you want to put them on top of each other, you need to put it in a container, and that container will be the one that will control all the items that is inside it. So if I want to work on this design, the first thing you need to do is to know the structure of your page. And the first structure that we have there is the body, which is always there. Then inside the body, I can see that there is a box here that is grouping everything together. So which means I'm going to have a container that is wrapping all this content. But inside the container, we have all these items here. So if I want to do this, I'm going to separate this container into two items too. There is one that is going to group all these items together, and there's another one that is going to group all these items together. So if I want to work on it, this is how I'm going to structure my HTML. But why am I structuring my HTML like this? Is because of the property that you need to place content side by side or to place them on top of each other. And that's the reason why I'm bringing it out here. Anytime you want to put anything side by side and you don't want it to affect other content, you need to put them in a container. And when you are talking with that container, it's not going to affect any other content that is outside of that particular container there. If you look at it here, I have this container that is wrapping everything, but inside this container too, I have the sub containers. So the one for this top section, and there's going to be another container here for this one that is going to group all these items together. And anytime I'm doing anything with this container at the top, it's not going to affect the container that I have down here. And anytime I'm doing anything with this container down here, it's not going to affect what I have on top here. And you might be thinking, but everything is looking alike. For now, they are looking alike. But when you get to some design later on, you see that you need to use a container to group your items in order for you to work with a particular container without touching any other content that you have outside of that particular container. So when we want to work on this, the first thing we need to do is inside our body, we're going to have the container that is grouping everything together. And inside that container too, we're going to have an extract two container. The first one is one that will group all this content at the top together, while the second one is what is going to group all these items down here together. So let's jump into the coding part and put all this in together. So the first thing we need to do is to generate our page content. So how do we generate our page content? You know this already. So let me close this one for now, and let me move this one to one side. So let me move this to one side. Right now I'm going to close all this HTML because we want to start with our project right now. So I'm going to create a folder here which is going to be P1. So in the next class we're going to have P2, which is for project 2, and again we are going to have P3. And there's a reason why I'm putting each one of them in a separate folder, because any file for this particular project, I don't want it to affect any other project that we'll be working on. So each one of them are going to be in their own separate folder. And for this one, this project only requires our HTML and CSS. We don't need anything like JavaScript. So since we only need HTML and CSS, it means we need to generate our HTML file, which is going to be this index.html. Let me increase the VS Code size. So, and again, inside it, we need our style.css. Don't forget, you can name this thing anyhow, but the extension have to match. And what do we need to do first? We need to structure our page. And what is the structure? That's our HTML. Anytime you are building anything, the first thing you work on is the HTML, the structure. And when you are done with the structure, the next thing is now to style it. And if there is anything like JavaScript there, then you can now include the JavaScript. But right now, we don't have anything like JavaScript. So the first thing we need to do is to structure our page. And what do we want to structure? We want to structure a page in a way that is going to have this shape. HTML is not going to make it to look like this. So you just have to structure. That's I call it structure. It's not that when you structure it there, it will just give you the design straightforward. No, you will be the one that will use CSS to make it to look like this. But you need to structure your page in a way that you'll be able to use CSS to make it look like this. HTML is not going to give you this look, but you have to use HTML to lay out the foundation. It's just like you want to build a house. You have to put out the foundation first before you start laying out your blocks. That's how it is here too. So the first thing we need to do here is to firstly generate our page. So let me go over it again, because this is our first time. That's why I'm going over again and again and again. Later on, by the time we get to like project 2 and 3, I won't be stressing more on this part. So we are going to have our body, because this is the entire page. So this is like the entire page, but this is how you are going to be looking at your design. Whatever design is given to you, you're always going to look at for the page. Then inside the page, you look at for all the content and how those content are related to each other. So inside this body now, I can see all this content, but this content is having a box. So which means there is a container here, which is a grouping element that we've talked about. So we're going to use one of our grouping elements to group all this content together. But inside this one too, there's a lot of content that is here that we can just put all of them directly inside this container. But we can't just put it there. Why? Because the spacing in between them are not equal. Look at the spacing here. It's on the same spacing here. It's on the same spacing here, and it's on the same spacing here. So since they are not the same spacing, it means they are not inside the same parent. they are inside a different period. Because in order for you to give this kind of a spacing and you want to use this property that I want to talk about, you need to group them in a container. And container is just grouping element that we've already talked about that I'm going to be using them today. So inside this box too, I'm going to have a container, and that container is the one that is going to contain all this content here. And apart from that, I'm going to have another container which is going to contain all this content too, so that anytime I'm working with the content here, it's not going to affect what I have here, and anytime I'm working here too, it's not going to affect what I have here too, because they are inside different container, and whatever you're doing with this container will not affect this, and whatever you're doing here too will not affect what I have at this top here. And that's the way you are going to be arranging a lot of content that you are going to be dealing with later on. And again, after this today's class, or if there is time, I'm going to show you other design, and I'll bring out how you can lay out the content on the paper, drawing out the way all the content are going to be grouped in the HTML before you start applying CSS on it. Because when you are designing any site, you must know how to combine all the elements that you've learned together to form the design that you are seeing on your screen. It's not just that, okay, because you know how to use form doesn't mean you know how to combine it with other elements so that you can have what the design is asking for. You must know how to combine all these elements together, or how to group them together in order for you to apply some CSS. Because if you don't group them correctly, if you start applying some of these CSS properties you'll be seeing later on, it will not work according to what you'll be expecting there, because some of this property requires you to create a container in order for it to work properly there. Just like the way I mentioned that layout, anytime you want to do any layout, you must put them in a group, or you must put them in a container. So, and when you now talk to that container, you can use the container to arrange all the items inside it, to place them side by side, which is what we refer to as row. So when you have them in this form, it is called row, and when you have it in this form, it is referred to as column. So when I'm using this property later on, anytime I'm using column, you already know how the elements are going to stack, and anytime I'm using row, you already know how the items are going to stack here. For example, if you look at those items now, they are stacked on top of each other. So which means here we are going to be using column. But anything that is side by side, you are going to be using row. And you are going to see the sample for this one in the coming classes there. But for now, this is what we are going to use for this one in order for you to stack it. But you might be thinking later on that, why all these things are stacked already, but why am I doing like that? It's because of the way some design are going to be later on. That's why you need this property, or that's why you need to know about this property, how you can use this to stack items on top of each other or move them side by side. So the first thing we need to do is to generate the page content, which is what you always do. And the title of this one is going to be let's just say profile display, which is going to be the project one. That's the title. So your title, you can name it anything. And this is the body, which is the container that I have here. So the container, so this is the first container, which is our body. And inside this body, we have another container here that is grouping all this content together. And inside this one too, we have another one that groups all the content at the top. And again, we have the one that groups all this one together. So how do we arrange this thing? Because this is the design, and this is what you have to replicate inside the HTML. So we already know how to generate image, you know how to generate paragraph, you know how to generate links, you know how to generate text, and a lot of them like that. But do you know how to combine it together? That's what we want to start doing now. So it's not just about the element, but you must know how to combine it together to form the design that you are seeing on the screen there. And as you can see, we already have the body already, which is this entire line. So we need to create a container that is grouping all these contents together here. And don't forget, we talked about all these grouping elements. And if you can still remember, I mentioned this section. This is one of the grouping elements that I talked about. We have this main. This is one of the grouping elements that you can use, or you can use for the container. We have aside. We have article. We have header. We have footer. A lot of them like that. And each one of them have the area where we used to use them. So we have nav and so forth like that. So these are some of the grouping elements that you can use. And each one of them have their area of usage, because they are used to represent different section on a page. For example, like this header now, we normally use it to represent the header part of the site, while this footer, we normally use it to represent the bottom part of the site, and the nav is used to represent the links, the navigation of your page there. But for now, the only one I will be going to be using among all this one is this main and this section here. So the main is what I'm going to use to represent this outer container here, while this section is what I'm going to use to represent all this inner section here. Because if you look at it, we have this main, we add the outer container, while this section we act as the grouping from this header part, while this section again we act as this another grouping for this area. If I want, I can actually use header for this one, so I can actually use header for that side. Whatever element you want to use as grouping, you can use them, but it's always good that you use the correct grouping elements there. But for now, I'm going to be using this section to do the grouping for the inner one, and I'm going to use main to do the grouping for the outer one. Another one that is commonly used that you will see me using later on too is this div here, which is division, that you can use to create different division on your page. And we're going to be using this one too a lot later on when we get to a design that is complex and that have a lot of different layouts inside. This one is just one layout. Everything is just from top to the bottom side like this. But this is not how all the content on your page are always going to lay out. Some of them are going to be in a row form, while some of them are going to be in a column form, and all of them are going to be on the same page, not that you have them on a separate page. So how do you deal with them? You call different grouping elements and you use it to group your elements together there. So let me put all this in practice. Okay, so what do we need to do? We need to start doing the grouping now. So I'm going to have the main. So this main now is the one that is going to act as this outer grouping here. This one, this line that is outside here. Let me draw this in with a different line so that I can reference to the stuff according to the line. So we have the body, which is what is there already. Now I'm creating the this one, which is what I'm using this blue color for. And inside it again, we are going to have these two inside it. So we have this one, this is another grouping, and again this is going to be another grouping here. So for this cyan color now, that's what this main is representing. So the cyan color is representing the main element, while the section is what I'm going to use for all this yellow group here. And inside this first group, that's where you now have the image. You know how to generate image. That's where we are going to have the one to generate for this one. We have this text and so forth like that. So this is how you are going to be modeling your page, and based on this model you generate the HTML that will act as all this line that I'm drawing on the design. So the first thing you need to look at in your design is that what is the layout of my design. Then based on that layout, you start generating the HTML that will correspond to all the elements that you have on the design. So if you have to look at the main element now, this is what we have inside it. So this is the main element. This entire box here is the main element. But inside the main element, we have the grouping at the top here that is holding this image, this the name, the address, and this other subtext. And again, we have another grouping that is holding all this content together there. So I'm going to have the first one there, which is going to be this. Let me use header so that they are going to be can be separate tag. So this inside this header, this is a grouping that is going to put all this in together. So this header is what I will be using now. Don't forget, I said you can use section, or you can use div, or you can use every other grouping element too. Doesn't need to be this header, but right now I'm using header to group all this content together. And again, I will be using section to group all this one together, because each one of them are links. When you click on them, it will take you to all these sites. But for now, we don't care about this site. We only care about the design. So this header now is the one that is going to group all this content together, while the section is the one that will group all this one together there. So inside the header, what do we have there? We have the image. But if you look at it, there's an image there. But how do we get this image? I will just go online and quickly look for let me just look for this. So I will just pick one image online. You can use any image you want. It can be your picture or anything. Just use any image. And I don't need to be explaining how to put image on this because you already know this the image tag already. So the only thing I'll be focusing on is the structure. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on with the network? Is it my network? Let me pick another one. Okay. So right click on the image you want, just copy the link to that image and paste. So saved, which will have the image on our page. So after the image, what do we have next? So where's if you look at it after the image, we have this other section. So I don't want to do a lot of grouping, but for now, I will just have only the header. But later on, you are going to have a lot of groupings. But for now, don't let me do much. So here, I'm going to have the name, which I'm going to use H1 to represent that name. Here, so I have this Jessica Randall like this. That is the name. And again, I'm going to have my P here, which is going to have a class because we are going to have a lot. We are going to have other P. This is P. This is another P. So when you want to style them, how are you going to differentiate the two P? So that's why I want to give it a class, and I'm naming the class. I'm giving the class name as an address. And what is inside the address? So we have the London United Kingdom now. So with this class now, I can target this P without talking about other P that we're going to be having on the page. We already talked about this one. So selector, we already talked about selector. And based on each element that you have on the page, you can target them based on the class, based on their name, and so forth like that. And again, so I'm going to have another P here, but this one is going to be quotes. So as you can see, I have two P, but I can target each one of them based on this class. So I can target this P now based on this class, and again I can target this P based on this class. So anytime I'm talking to this class, it will only affect this one, and every time I'm talking to this one too, it will only affect this P here. So let me put the content. So this one I will just it's not every time I'm going to put all this content because when we're working on a design that I have a lot of content, I will just be using my lorem later on. So all right, so this is what is there like that. So if I save and let me run it so that we see what we have there. So let me run it and let us see what we have. So it's not going to look like what you have on the browser right now. The design is not going to be like this because what we're actually doing right now is the structure. And when you are dealing with the structure, the design is not going to be the same thing as what you are looking on the browser. So it's always going to be a little bit different. As you can see, it's always going to be a little different. Look at the image. So that the image is not looking like what we have here. But through the CSS now, we are going to make the image to look like this. Currently, the image is going to display normally the way it used to be, but through the CSS, we are going to change the image to this R1. So anytime you are doing layout, the layout is not going to follow the design you have or the design you are looking at. But what you have to be looking there is at the structure, not the final design. The final design will come from the CSS because HTML doesn't give you any design. But you have to do the structure correctly in the HTML, and from there you now use the CSS to finish the remaining stuff that is left. So currently here, we are able to deal with this header part, and inside the header part, we have the image, and we have the name, we have this London United Kingdom, which is our address, and we have this code. But right now, everything is not looking like the way we want it to look like. So when we get to the CSS, you start seeing that everything will start coming in shape. So we just finished this first group, so which is this header part here, which I can quickly close so that I can focus on the other section, which is this area here. So the other section we have here is this area that I'm going to use section to represent it. And as you can see, each one of them here are linked. And why is it linked? Is because if you click on it, it will take you to the page for each one of them. That's why it is linked. But how do I know that it is linked? It's because I've been working with this thing a lot, and the more you work with a lot of design, you know what is linked, what is not linked, what is button, what is not button. Because right now it looks like button, but technically it's not button, it's just a link. Because anytime you click it, it will take you from one page to another. And the link here is not that big link, or it's not something that is require any logic. So what you use to represent all this one is just by using your a tag. Because right now, if you look at it, it's not looking like anything like a tag. But right now, I'm using a tag because with CSS, I can turn this a to anything that I want. But why am I using a tag? Is because each one of them, they are sites. As you can see, this is Twitter, this is Instagram, this is LinkedIn, this is the front-end mentor, and this is the GitHub. And anytime you click on any one of them, it will take you to this site. That's the reason why I'm using a tag. So for the first one, it's going to be this github.com like this. So what is the text or what is the content that you want to show? So this is the content. So I'm going to duplicate it. The second one is the front-end mentor there like that, which you can put the site to here. So let me put their site. So the front-end mentor like that. This is the site. So which I can even put, this is the site here. So let me copy the link. Don't forget, we are not the owner of all this link. This is the external link. So you get the link and you paste it, but I don't need all this one. So the only one I need is just this front-end mentor IO. And again too, I don't even need to put this one, it will do it for me because I don't want this thing to be longer than the other one. So the next one that we have there is LinkedIn. So this one too, we have this LinkedIn. This one is not IO, it's .com. I know, don't forget, you need to get the correct link. Because if you don't put the correct link, it will not work. So the text that we want to show there is this LinkedIn. So apart from this LinkedIn, which one do we have there? We have that Twitter, which is now X. So it's going to be x.com, and this one is going to be Twitter like this. So come down, the last one is Instagram. So the link is Instagram like this, and the content there is Instagram. And if I save this thing, it will not look like it will not look like this. Don't forget how your link used to look like by default. So if I go back to the page, we are done with the structure. So if I go back to the page, we are done with the structure. Look at everything. This is the structure, but this is not our final design. And that's the reason why you need to know how to structure, because sometimes the structure, almost all the time, the structure will not follow the actual design you are working on, but you must do it correctly. Because if you don't do it correctly, once you enter CSS and you start using all this property, it will not work the way you're expecting it to work. If you look at it, the design is putting everything on top of each other, and it's not like the way it's showing currently. But now that our structure, this is how it's looking like. But once you dive into the CSS now, you start seeing that everything is coming into shape one by one because of the way we structure our HTML code. But if you don't structure the HTML code correctly, then you are not going to get what you're expecting to get at that particular place. So let me move this thing side by side again so that we can quickly dive into the CSS, because I'm showing you the process that you always follow every time. The first thing you need to do, have your project, which is something we already have already, which is this P1. Inside our P1, we've already generated the file that we need here, which is this index.html and this style.css. And inside our index.html, we've already generated our structure along with the content that we want to display. But now we need to connect to the CSS. And how do you connect to the CSS? You know that you need to link this your external CSS to this your HTML. Now I'm not using internal CSS. I'm using external, which is a separate file. But now we need to connect this CSS, because right now if I select P and if I give it a font size of maybe 67px right now, you see that nothing will work because the style and the HTML are not connected. That's the reason why you see that nothing is happening to my P. So which means we need to connect the CSS to our HTML. And how do you connect CSS to HTML? You know, don't forget, you need to use the link. And inside this link, as you can see already, is assuming that it is style sheet, which is CSS. The only thing you just need to do is to supply the location of the CSS that you want to connect to. So I have the link, which is inside the head. So it's already been set down to CSS. The only thing we just need to do is to point it to the location of where the file that we want to connect to. Since they are inside the same folder, just mention the name of the file and followed by the extension of that file. And now if I save it, you see that two of them will be connected together, and as you can see, it can see our CSS now. So all the P on the page are now being changed to this font size of 67px. So in order for the CSS and the HTML to know about each other, you need to connect them, not because of the way you arrange it, but because of the link that we are using here. So this link is what you are going to use to connect the HTML to the CSS. and inside the href supply the location of the CSS you want to connect to. What's the CSS, the name of it, and the extension of the CSS file. No, don't forget, if the CSS is another folder, you need to use that our folder pattern that we've already talked about. Now we've already have the CSS on our page, so the next thing we need to start doing is to style the content on the page. But anytime you are working with your site, there is some silly style that the browser is applying by default. So there is some silly style that the browser is applying by default. One of them is this margin and padding. But if you notice this side here, you see that this Cristiano Ronaldo image here is not touching the edge. So if you look at it, there's some white space here, there's some extra white space here too. Why is this image not touching this edge? It's because the browser is applying some silly property by default for you. But this silly property, we don't need it. We don't want the browser to do it for us. We want it to do it by ourselves. So what do we need to do? We need to remove some of these default settings that the browser is doing for us. But how do we talk to all the elements on the page? Don't forget, when we are dealing with our selector, I talked about the universal selector, which is this asterisk. And this asterisk is what we normally use to do some reset on some of the elements or all the elements we have on the page. So we use this asterisk, which is the universal selector. So what this one is going to do is that it's going to select every element on the page, and whatever you are doing there is going to apply it on all of them. For example, now if I use border 1 pixels solid red, you see that every of the content on the page are going to have this thing. But this is not what we use it for. We normally use it to reset or to remove some of the default settings that the browser is applying on this element. And one of the settings there is this padding, which we need to turn back to 0. And again too, we have margin. So the margin is what the browser is using here. That's why you are seeing this white space around that image. And if I save it now, you see that there is nothing like white space again here, because we've already removed it there. This is it. This is what the browser is applying by default. As you can see, there is white space here. But now, after applying the margin of 0, any element on the page, their margin is going to turn to 0. Any element on the page, their padding is going to turn to 0. That's what I'm saying. This asterisk is selecting everything on the page and is turning their padding to 0, because we don't want the browser to do any setting for us, and we are turning margin to 0. Another one that we normally do here is box sizing, which I'll be explaining later on here. But the one you always use is this border box. For now, these are the 3 settings that you need. These are the 3 settings that you need, but I will explain this border sizing later on. It might be a video that we'll do separately and send the link, or it's going to be in the future class, because it's not something we need right now, but it's very important that you always use it, because when you started using your width and height along with the padding or margin, it used to cause some trouble on the page there. So, and that's the reason why you need this one, so that the browser knows how to size the content on the page. I will explain this one better later on, but for all this one, this is what you use to reset the padding and the margin that the browser used to apply by default on the element that you have on the page. And as you can see now, the Cristiano Ronaldo image is now touching the edge of the box. Before, it will never touch, because the browser has already applied margin on the body, and that margin or the padding on the body is the one that is not allowing all this thing to touch the edge, which is not what you want. You always want your content to touch the edge, and anywhere you don't want it to touch, you do it yourself, not that the browser will be doing it for you. So these are the default settings you are going to do at the top anytime you are working on any page. So the first thing, select every element on the page, change their padding to 0, margin to 0, box sizing to border box, and any one of them that requires all this thing later on, you can now apply it there. So the next thing we need to select here is our body, because we need to work on the body. And if you look at the way I'm working on all these elements, as you can see, I'm working on them according to the way they are being arranged. So starting from the body, the next one is going to be main. Then after the main, you see that we now have header. So again, we have this image, we have all this content. Then when we are done with the header, we now move to the section. Then we'll enter and work on everything that is inside. And that's how you are going to be styling your content on the page. You are going to work from top down to the bottom. That's how you do the styling. Not that you just quickly work on this, you now jump to another thing. No, that's not the way. you arrange your selector and according to the way you arrange your elements on the page. When you are dealing with CSS, you don't just arrange this thing anyhow. You arrange them according to the way that you arrange the content or you structure your page. So starting from the body, when we are done with the body, we move to this main. But if you look at it, there is no any other thing after main. So we need to enter the main. And inside the main, if you look at it, we have header and we have section. So when we are done with the header, we enter, modify whatever we need to modify inside it. And when we are done, then we move to the next one that follows it, which is section. And when we are done with section 2, we enter what is inside it. And if there is anything after section, you keep going like that. And that's how you are going to be styling the content on the page. Not that you just pick any of the elements and you start applying style. Then no, you start applying the style according to the way you arrange the content on the page. So, and the first one that we have there is the body. And that's the reason why you see that I'm selecting body here. So inside the body, we have background color, which is black. So if you look at the design we are following there, the background here is kind of a black. As you can see, it's not that black. So it's not that black, but it's close to black. It's around this area here, but it's still close. So black are there. So this is the reason why I'm getting a background color of black. But now you will not be able to see all the text that is inside the body, because everything is done black. So what we need to do, I can quickly change the color so that we can see everything. So to white. But something is going to happen here. If you look at it, only the text are changing, the length is not changing. So when we get to the length part, we are going to modify it. And the reason why it's working like this, I will explain it in the coming class. So I will skip all those ones for now, all those technical parts. I will skip them for now, and we have a separate class to explain all those technical parts there. So what do we need to talk about for now? We are not done with the body, but we need to go with the next elements that we arrange on the page. If you look at it, we have the main. So if you look at it, after the body, we have the main. So after the body, we have the main. And after the main, which element do we have next? We have the header. And after this one, we have section. But before we get to section, there's some element that is inside this header here. For example, I have H1 there. So I have H1. Apart from that, I have an element with the address. So now I'm selecting based on address. If you have based on class, all this one I'm selecting them based on tag name. Why this one I'm selecting it based on class? It all depends on which one you want to use. If you like, you can select based on class. If you like, you can select based on tag name. But some of them you have to select based on class, because if you select based on tag name, it will affect a lot of elements on the page. And that's the reason why you see that here inside this particular header, for this p tag here, I give it a class address, and for this one I give it a class code, because if I target it with p, whatever I'm doing here will affect this one, whatever I'm doing here too will affect this one. But if you look at the design, they are not the same. They are not having the same design. If you look at this, the color of this one is not the same thing as the color of this one, and again the thickness of this one is not the same thing as this one. And that's the reason why I gave them different class, so that I can style them based on the class, not based on the name. But if I use this name, whatever I'm doing here will affect this one. Whatever I'm doing here, so it's still what is going to affect here. But if you look at the design, they are not the same thing. And that's the reason why I'm selecting them based on class, not based on the name. But if you look at the other one, they are just one on the page. So we only have one main, we only have one header, and we only have one section. Later on, when we get to some design, you see that we're going to have a lot of section or a lot of header or main like that. So if you have a lot of element on the page and they have different design, you have to select them based on other selectors, so that the CSS doesn't treat them the same, so that I can treat them differently based on what is on the page added. So if you look at it here, I have H1, I have this P with the class address, I have this P with the class code, and that's all about this area here. And again, after this section, I have the A. So look at the way I arrange them. I arrange them according to the way they are being used. Started from the body. So the body comes first. So the body comes first. Then after the body, we have main. That's why the main is here. Then inside the main, we have header, because there is nothing after main again. What we have is inside the main. And inside the main, we have header. Inside the header, we have H1. We have this address, and we have this code. and after that we have section, and inside section we have the A. So the way you be arranging all this your selector is always going to be based on the way you arrange the tag on the page, because later on when you are looking for anything or you want to make modification, you already know the section to go. It's not a must to, you can scatter them around, it will still work, but that's not professional, like you doing it in that way. It is not good at all, because when you want to modify anything you start looking around because of the way you arrange it. But if you arrange them according to the way your HTML is arranged, anytime you are here or anytime I look at this image, I already know where the image is, which is under this header. So what I just need to do is go to where there is header. I know that I'm going to find image at that particular side, which I have not really selected here. So the image is supposed to be here too, but it is under this header there. And anytime I'm looking for anything, once I see the way it's arranged here, I will just go to my CSS, look at my selector, go to that area according to the way the selector is arranged there. You don't just arrange anything anyhow. You follow structure. You structure all these things according to the way the page is structured. You don't just style anything anyhow. You start from the beginning, then or from the top, then you keep moving downward. That's how you be doing it, just like the way you arrange the content on the page. So starting from the body, do whatever you want to do with the body, then move inside to the next element. Then when you are done with this one too, move to the element that is inside it. So if that one too is having element, you finish that one, then you go outside, then you connect with the other element that follows all those one here. And that's how you always work. You start from the top and you keep moving downward until you get to the last design there. So here now we started from the body, which we gave it this background color and this color of white. So inside the main too, we need to give it background color, because if you look at it, the body is having its own background color and the main too is having its own background color. Currently here I'm going to give it background color of red, so you can see what is going on here. So if I give you background color of red, and if I go back to the page, you see that we are going to have the background of red, which is covering the entire stuff. And the reason why it's covering the entire stuff is because of this image and the content has not yet structured properly. But for now, it looks like everything has changed to, as you can see, it's not changed. The red with the black is actually at the back. But because the main element is having a lot of content inside it, that's why it looks like covering the entire page. It's not covering the entire page, it's because of this image. The image is too large. But how do you reduce the image? You know that we can actually reduce any of the image using our height or the weight. So I'm going to give it height of 100 pixels and the weight of 100 pixels, so that I can reduce the image. As you can see, can you see now? So this red, it was covering the entire stuff before. It's because of the image. The image is too large. Don't forget, any image you are using, they are going to use the original size, but that doesn't mean you cannot change it. You can change it to anything you want. The original size is what is showing for us, but this is not what we want. We want it to be of a particular size. But if you look at the design, the image is not big. It's just this of this size here. So I don't know the size, but I'm just using 100 pixels right now. So that's the reason why I just change it to width of 100 pixels and the height of 100 pixels. But you might ask, why did I give them the same value? It's because I want to turn it to circle. So anytime you want to turn anything to circle, the height and the width have to be the same. Anytime you want to turn anything to circle, the height and the width of that element needs to be the same. But it's not going to give you that circle directly like that too. You need to use border radius, which is what we talked about at the last class there. And this border radius can be anything from 50% upward. So if I save it now, as you can see, the image is now circle. So in order for your image to be a circle or any content to be in a circular form, you have to give it a definite height and width. So the height and width must be the same, and border radius of 50% or above. If you give it 100, it's just waste of typing, because 50% will always give you that circle already. So instead of you using 100%, just use 50% directly. It will still give you the same result, whether you use 100 or 50% there. Once you give it the same height and width, it will always go to circle. But if it's not the same height and width, then you not get what you are looking for. As you can see, it will start going into oval shape. So if the height and the width are not the same thing, then it will start forming oval for you, based on which one is larger there like that. So if it is this one that is like 180, you see that, can you see? it will give you this oval shape. So in order for it to be a perfect circle, then the height and the weight have to be the same. Then border radius of 50% or above, but always use 50%. It's going to give you this circle of 18 like this. So when you are using, or when you have elements that you want to turn to circle, this is how you are going to do it. The height and width can be anything. It doesn't need to be 120, but whatever you are using for the height, that's what you are going to use for the width, or whatever you are using for the width, that's what you are going to use for the height. And the border radius is going to be this 50 or any number greater than 50%, but most of the time what you just need is 50%, which is going to turn into this circle here. I hope you guys are following, because I'm not, there is no feedback.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is the reason why I have to reduce this one first is because the image is too large and it's going to take a lot of space, because if I don't reduce it, you see that some element is not going to come out the way, can you see? It's really taking a lot of space. So that's the reason why I have to quickly reduce this one first, so that I can see the other content that is going on the page. But there's a property here that I want to explain. Don't forget I mentioned that you can lay your element to be in a row form or to be in a column form, or whatever to column, whatever to row. So if you check the video again, you are going to see that. So row means that you are laying out in horizontal form, while column means you are stacking all the items on top of each other. What do you refer to as item? They are just the content that you have on the page. If you look at it now, the image is at the top, the text follow it, this one follow and follow like this. All this one here, they are stacked. But the property we want to use come with other properties that doesn't work by default if you don't display as flex. So there's a property known as display flex. So we have a property known as this display. This is the name of the property, and this display can assume any value, but the value we need right now to look at it, your display can be of any type of display that you want, but the one we're always going to be using later on is this flex and grid. But for now I want to use flex. Flex is a flexible layout that we're going to be using a lot later on, that allows you to put things side by side or to stack them on top of each other. So this flex is a property that you can use to stack items in a parent together or to put them side by side. So anytime you are having a flex, the parent is what you are going to be displaying as flex, but whatever that is inside it, we either stack side by side like this, which is what we refer to as row, or it can be stacked together like this, which is going to be column. So when you stack things together like this is what we refer to as column. When it is in this form, this is what we refer to as row. But before you can start doing this row or doing column, you must display the container, and that is why you see that I'm grouping some of this content in a container. And what are the container here on our page? So the container here is this main. Again, another container is this header. Another container here is this section, because they are containing other content inside them. If you look at the header, it contains this image, this h1, this p, and this p here, and the main contain this header and the section. And anytime you want to use flex, it's flex work with the parent and the child that is inside it, or all the children that is inside it. So when you are talking about the flex display, you are going to have a container and you are going to have the element inside it, and the element inside it is what we refer to as items. So we have something referred to as a flex container. So we have something called flex container, and we have something called flex items. So the flex container is whatever element you are displaying as flex, and whatever that is inside it are what we call flex items. So here now I'm displaying this body as flex, so which means this body now is a flex container, while this main is a flex item. So if I display this main too as a flex, it means this main is a flex container, this header is flex item, this section is another flex item, because both of them are inside main. Any element that you display as flex, whatever that is inside it, direct element that is inside it are going to be flex item. Anything that you display as flex, or any element you display as flex, any element that is inside it directly, any direct element that is inside it, because these are the only direct element, even though there is some other element inside it. So this image is inside main, but it's not direct. So any direct element that is inside the one that you display as flex, those are the one we refer to as flex item. So for this main, the flex item is going to be this header and this section here. While for the body, the only flex item that is going to be there is main. So any element that is under that particular one that you display as flex, those are the one that you are going to call flex items. And if it is more than one, that's what we call it is flex items. So any direct element that is inside the one that you display at this flex, they are referred to as flex items, while the one that you actually display is referred to as a flex container. So which means here now the body is our flex container, while the main is going to act like a flex items. So if you look at the way this thing is before, so if I save this one, can you look at the red? Look at where the red is stopping. But now if I display the body as look at where the body, or look at where this content is stopping now. It's quite different. It's because of the way this flex work. So when you display element as flex, it will either put what you have inside it side by side, or it will place them on top of each other. And by default, any container that you display as flex, whatever that is inside it is going to place them side by side by default. So what am I saying here? Let me display this main as flex so that you can see this in action, because inside the body we only have one item, but inside this main we have two items, so that you can see how it works correctly. But this thing you only see it when you are dealing with multiple elements, but when you are dealing with one element, it doesn't look as if something is changing there like that. So let me display this main as flex and you see what is going on there. But before I do that, let me give all this one background color so that you can see what is going on. Because now, so let me give this one blue. So don't forget we have two group inside the main, the header and we have this section. So I'm going to give two of them background color so you can see where one is starting and where one is ending there. So if I save it, as you can see, this is the group of this yellow one, which is that section, and for this blue area, that is this header. So now if I display this main, as you can see by default, they are stacked on top of each other. But now if I display it as flex, you see what will happen now. Can you see now? They are now placed side by side. So with this flex property, you can move items side by side, or you can stack them on top of each other. And by default, any element that you display flex, whatever that is inside it, that are going to be placed side by side. So any element that you place inside a flex container, they are going to be placed side by default. But this is not what we want. So how do you change it back to the other direction? So we have a property that you can use here, which is known as flex direction. So flex direction now is what you can use to change the direction to anyone that you want. By default, it is row. If you don't use this flex direction, it's always row, which means they are placed side by side. But what if you want them to be on top of each other, then you can use column. Column is what you can use to stack, and as you can see, it's go back to the way it is before. But you might be thinking, why do I need to do this thing to do what we have there before? It's because this flex property here, there's some other property you want to use. If you don't display as flex, it doesn't work. All the other properties that I want to use later on, they don't work until you display as this flex. In order for them to work, you must have a display of flex. If you don't have a display of flex, it doesn't work. Even this your flex direction here will not work. So which means if I change it to row, it will never work, because you must display as flex first before it will work. When you want to use that display, when you want to use this flex direction or some other property that we'll be bringing it to, they don't work until you display as flex. It's when you display as flex, that's where all this property will start working. If you don't display as flex, they don't work. And by default, if you display as flex, it will arrange them in a row direction. So which means it will place them side by side. And if I have any other content again, you see that it will just be putting them side by side. But that's not what I want. I want them to be stacked on top of each other. And in order for you to stack them on top of each other, we need to change the direction from what is there before, which is this row. I need to change it to column. And column means that you want to put the content on top of each other. There is another one there too, but this is one we need to focus on right now. When we need the other one, I will bring them in there like that. So when you want to place items side by side, you need to display the container. That means the one that is holding all those items together as a flex. And that's what I will be doing down here too, because if you look at it, all these links they are placed side by side because they are inline by default. So what do I need to do here in order to make them to be on top of each other? The first you need to do, display as flex, is going to put them side by side, which is what is here by default. But now I can change the direction by using flex direction of column. And if I save it here, now can you see each one of them are now going to be stacked on top of each other like this. But something is going on there, so let me give each one of them background so that you can see what is going on there. So let me give it orange like this, and if I save it, as you can see each one of them, there is no space. So how do you give a space in between all these items? That's where this property comes in. We have a property known as gap, and this gap is what you can use to space each item that is inside a container. So if I save it now, you see that, can you see before there is no space? Let me remove this thing. Before, all of them are jam packed together, or even if they are side by side too. So let me save it and let me show you this thing properly. Look at the GitHub, look at this front end mentor, everything are jam packed together. So how do you give space in between all these items? That's where gap comes in. Gap is what you can quickly use to give space in between all the flex items. So any item that is flex inside a flex container, you can quickly use this gap to space them, because by default you won't have any space. Once you display as flex, you don't have any space. So how do you give a space? That's where gap comes in. So instead of you going inside each one of them and give a margin outside there like that, you don't need to do that one. Just give a gap, and once you give a gap, then the CSS will handle that space automatically. Look at it now. The spacing is now there based on the value here. So if I use like 3, it means the spacing that will be there is going to be this, and it's going to put it in between all of them like this. Not that you be the one that will talk to each item like that. It's going to do it for you automatically. So whether the direction is row or it's column, it's always going to put a space there like this. I will explain this more in the next class to explain what all this in are. But for now, in order for them to be on top of each other, we need to display as flex, we need to change direction to column, and you need to give a gap to give the space in between them. But I'm going to use this one area. Right now I'm using this to explain this display of flex, flex direction, and the gap, which is used to place items side by side or to stack them on top of each other. So any element can be stacked on top of each other or placed side by side. What you just need to do, go to the parent where all these elements are placed, display it as flex, and you can now use the flex direction to change the direction of the flex, whether you want it to be side by side, which is row, or you want it to be stacked on top of each other there. Don't forget, we are displaying this body as flex too. So which means here the main too is now flex item under the body. I will explain this thing better tomorrow. I'm going to record a video that explain this flex a lot, because there's a lot of things you need to explain you need to experience with this flex before you understand or you start using it in a correct way there. So when you display anything as flex, whatever that is inside it is going to be flex item, and those flex items there, you can space them or you can move them around by using some of the flex property. One of the flex property here is this flex direction, which you can use to change the direction of the content. Don't forget, by default the direction is row, and as you can see, it's placing them side by side. So this one is by this side and this one is by this side. But if I want them to be on top of each other, I just need to change it to column, which is going to stack them. The same thing here too. I'm displaying this body as flex. I can move this main anyhow I want inside the body. But how do you do that? There's another property that we can use, which is known as this justify content. So we have a property known as justify content, and this is what you can use to move your content on the horizontal axis. For now, this justify content is what you can use to move content on the horizontal axis. This is what we call horizontal here. And we have another one that you can use to move content on the vertical axis. So when you want to move content from left to right, this is where this justify content comes in. When you want to move content from this top to bottom here, that's where this align item comes in. So we have justify content and we have this align items. Justify content is used to move your content that you have inside the container on the horizontal axis, while the align items is used to move vertically. For now, that's how they work, but that's not how That's not the only way they work. This thing is based on the direction. But for now, let's just assume we are dealing with the row. So anytime you are dealing with the row direction, justify content is talking about horizontal, while align is talking about vertical. So anytime you are dealing with the row direction, this justify is talking about horizontal, while align is talking about vertical. Anytime you are dealing with the row direction, justify is talking about horizontal, while align is talking about vertical. So how do you want to move this item in this vertical direction? That's the align when you are dealing with the row. So but when you are dealing with column, it's different. So when we get there, I will explain that one too. But now there's some value that you can use but for now the only one I want to use here is center. So which means on the horizontal axis, I want to move all this content here that is tagged to the left to the center, and if I save it, you see that everything now will be shifted to the center automatically. Everything. Why is it shifting everything? Is because everything is inside main, and since I'm shifting main, whatever that is inside main too will follow too. And that's the reason why this grouping are very important, that I'm not doing this one separately and I'm not doing this one too separately. Everything are inside section, so that anytime I'm moving this section, everything that is inside the two are going to follow. The same way too, if you want to shift vertically, you can use this align to shift it, but it's not going to work right now because your body is not actually here. Your body is actually, the body is here, it's not here. So in order for the body to be here, we need to change the height of the body, because now if I move this one to the center, you might be thinking that this thing is not working. It's actually working. The reason why you are not seeing it going to the center is because the body actually stop here. The body is not getting to the end of my browser. So in order for the body to get to the end of my browser, I need to use this minimum height. So which means I want to use this 100 VH. And by now you know what is VH. VH means 100% of the vertical height. So what I'm saying is that the body should cover up the entire of this my browser, the height of it. So if I'm using VW, don't forget that's the horizontal one. And if I save it now, you see that this box now is going to be at the center of the page. No matter the size of your browser, it always go to the center of the page. But why is it going to the center of the page? It's because of these three properties here. The reason why it's going to the center of the page is because of these three properties here. If I disable them, you see that it's not going to work like that again. So and why is it working? Is because of this flex. Because the flex is really flexible, just like the name. The flex is really flexible that you can use to move content around on your page. Once you display as flex, it will change everything that is inside it into flex item. Then those items now by default they are going to be side by side, but the reason why you are not seeing anything side by side is because we only have one item inside the body, and since we only have one item, that's why we just look at it's just like one item that we have there. But later on you see that you are going to have a lot of other content there. What's going on? Oh, I'm clicking on this X. Let me go back. I clicked on the link, so let me go back to the page and let me reload. Yeah, so as you can see here, I have all this content, but these are not the background that is here. But in order for you to see what is going on, that's why I'm using all this blue, the yellow, and this orange color, so that things don't look anyhow. Because normally the background we're supposed to use are this one here, which is this black and this grayish color here. But in order for you to see what is going on, that's why I'm using all this color that is here. So when you display anything as flex, flex allows you to move things around the way you want it. But the problem with flex is that it treats everything that is inside it as item. And don't forget, the items can either be arranged in a column direction or in a row. So if you display anything as flex, it will move them in a row, which means everything will side by side. And the reason why it's moving all this one side by side, because this is one item, this is another item here, because we have inside this main I have header, and at the same time I have this section. So those are the two items here, and that is why it's placing them side by side. But what if I want to move them on top of each other? You cannot change the direction by using this flex direction and changing it to column, then it's going to stack them on top of each other. But with this now, you can move items around the way you want inside it. The same thing that I did with this container, I can do it too for this one that we have there, this header here. So I can just come here, display it as flex. Don't forget, this header too is a group on its own, which is holding this image, the name, this London and this one here. And if I save it down, you see that it's moving content side by side. This is not what we want. We want it to still be on top of each other, so I can use my flex direction, which is going to be column. But you might be thinking this thing is going back to the way it is. Why? It's because I want to apply something known as gap, and this gap is what you can use to apply space in between all the items that is inside it, and you can use it too to move things on the horizontal axis or on the vertical axis. So what I want to do on the horizontal axis, I want to move everything to center, but this one now is not going to work. But don't forget, and why is it not working? You see now, the reason why it's not working is because of the way the align items and justify contents work. So the one we need here is align items. Okay. The one we need here is align items, and if I use it now, can you see all the content they are going to center by default there. But now, why is this one working for the horizontal? Why is it working for the horizontal? It's not working for vertical again, because what I mentioned that time is that this align work with vertical. Why? So let me draw the line again so that you can see what is going on. Hello?
So we are with you.
Yeah. So this is what is going on here. Yeah. So this is what is going on here. Anytime you display as a flex, anytime you display as flex, by default, the direction is going to be row, which means it will place them side by side. But you can actually change the direction by using this flex direction, and you can use column, which is going to place them on top of each other. But if your direction is row, so if your direction is row, justify is talking about this horizontal, while align is talking about vertical. That one is when your direction is row. When this flex direction is in row, justifier is talking about um, horizontal, while align is talking about vertical. But once you change the direction to column, these two will switch their side. Once you change the direction to column, so let me draw the red. So this one should be for red. Yeah, so let me use, so this one should be, so this blue now is when your direction is row, and this red is when your direction is column. So when your direction is in column, align is talking about horizontal, while justifier is now talking about vertical. Please, when your direction is in row, justifier is talking about horizontal, which is the blue, align is talking about vertical. But when the direction is not in column, then justify is talking about vertical, while align is talking about horizontal. Anytime you are working with a direction of row, anytime you are working with a direction of row, justify is talking about horizontal, while align is talking about vertical. But anytime the direction change to column, then your align will now be horizontal, while your justify will now be vertical. Hello? My battery. So
Sir, please can you come again, sir? Because
yeah, this is it. We have two type of direction. We have two type of direction. You have horizontal and we have vertical. We have oh, let me draw the line. Let me draw the box. It's because of this battery. I don't have the battery will show. So there, this is what we have. Your content can either be like this. So your content can either be placed like this. This is what we call row here. This is the row direction. Or your content can be like this. Your content can be like this, which is what we call column. So when your direction is column, this is how the content are going to be placed. They are going to be stacked. When your direction is a row, this is how the content are going to be stacked. So and this one now, whether you are in row or you are in column there, you're always going to have this vertical line and this horizontal line. So whether you are in this or you are in this, you're always going to have this line. So but now the problem here is that the way all this align and justify work based on the one you are dealing with. So when you are dealing with this one, when you are dealing with this one, when you are dealing with this one here, which is the column, justify is talking about this line, while align is talking about this line. I hope you get it now. when the direction is in column, when the direction is this one, so when the direction is column, your justifier is talking about this line, like me the movement is from top to bottom for this justifier, while a line is talking from left to right. But when your direction is row, when your direction is row, then when your direction is row, then justifier is this line, while a line is this line. As you can see, they are switching. Hello.
Yeah. Yes, I
So
get it.
when the direction is column, justify is this vertical line, align is this horizontal line. But when the direction is row, your justifier is this one, while your align is the vertical line. Anytime you are dealing with the column, your justify will be moving content from top to the bottom or from bottom to the top, depending on the whether you are reversing it or not. And align will be talking about left and right. That one is when you are dealing with this vertical. But when you are dealing with this particular row here, your justify is talking about horizontal, which means left to right, while the align is talking about top to the bottom there. You get this more in the next class, so I don't want this my battery to die halfway. You get more of this in, or you can rewatch the video so that you get more of it there. So I don't want to waste time because it's already
Okay.
1:16 like this. But this thing is not something we are using only today. We are going to use it in the next class. We are going to use it in other classes too. So it's something we are going to be using a lot, and I will keep explaining them when we get into all those classes. But today is just like the introduction to this flex. This flex, I will still be explaining it in the coming class because you are going to be using it a lot to lay out the content on the page there. So here, in order for this content to be at the center, and since I've already justify everything, or since I've already aligned all this flex direction to the column here, that's why I'm using align, because to move everything to this center here, because I need to move fast now because of the time. We really spend a lot of time, but this is our first class on the proper design, so that's how it used to be. But from the other class, we won't be spending most of the time on some of this property because you only require one class to explain them. Another class we start using the stuff. So I'm going to remove all this background so that I quickly put everything in shape. So for the main, this is not the background that is there. It is the black color, but that black color is not that black like this. So it's close to this area here, which I'm going to save, which is going to start looking like what we have on the actual design. But if you look at it, there is space inside the box, but our own is not having space. By now you know what we can use to do that. What can we use to put the space inside the box? I want to put the space inside the main so that all these things are not jam packed to the end. Which property am I going to use to do that? Which property am I going to call to apply the spacing inside the box? We talked about this
Gap,
last. Which
Gap.
property? Huh?
gap.
You said what?
I
Gap.
said the gap property.
No. I mean inside the box. Inside the box. Inside this main. I want to put
So,
space there at the edge. The space have to be at not in between the content, at the edge. As I mentioned, the edge. You can see that all this content are jam packed to the edge. So I want to look at this Cristiano
that
Ronaldo
should be a
image.
problem.
So yeah, so that's it. So padding.
Yes.
So it is spacing at the edge. So look at the Cristiano Ronaldo image. You see that it is at the edge. But look at the original design. You see that at the top, there's a lot of space here. Again, to look at the bottom side, there is space. Look at the edge. There is space here and there is space here. That's the one I'm looking for, not the one in between the content. So when you need the space in between the content and you've already displayed it as flex, that's where you'll be using gap. Gap doesn't give you the space at the edge of the box. So what we need here is the padding. So if I save it now, you see that we have we have that space in there now. But the one at the top is really much. You know, we can actually call the top. So I can actually talk to padding top and I can give it around that 3 area. And it's only going to apply it to that top only. And as you can see, the top is much compared to the other one. And I think the left one too, the left and right. So the left and right or the bottom side. So let me talk about, instead of me talking about this, let me just use block. No, block is talking about top and bottom. So, which is what we've talked about. So the first value is for the top and the second value is for the bottom. Padding block is only talking about top and bottom. Padding is talking about all of them. So this one will set 1 rem by default for all of them. But now I'm now resetting the value for the top and the bottom. But instead of me doing it like this too, for this waste of typing, I can actually do 3 rem, 1 rem, and this one is going to be 2 rem, which is what we talked about. This is the top, this is left and right, and this is the bottom. Don't forget the first value is for the top, the second one is for the right, the third one is for the bottom. But because this one did not have, it will take from the opposite, which is this one here. And if I save it, you see that we still have the same design. That's why you need to understand all this property, because somebody else can just come and do it another way, just like what I did before. You know, they are not on the same line, but it's still working the same way. And that's why you need to understand all this property on their own, because you can use them in different way and you are going to have the same result. So this one is for the top, this for the left and the right, and this for the bottom. Again, we need the radius because that thing is not that. So this one should be around that 1 rem, which is going to give us this round edge, but it's too much. The 1 rem is too much, so it should be around that 8 pixels. Because if I go back to the original design, it's there, but it's not that much there. So let me quickly fix the other color. For the flex, I will still explain it better in the next class, but I just introduce you to flex property right now. So where's our text? So if you go up there, we did not even change the font family. We'll come back into that one. So inside the H1, this one too is too big. It's not supposed to be bigger like that. So I'm going to change the font size, which is going to be around that 24 pixels. Don't forget, you can change the font size of any text. So anything. Well, the same thing, this London, I don't want it to be big like that, and the color should be something else. So I will change the font size of this one too. So the font size should be around that 14 pixels like this, and the color should be yellow green. I don't know the color. I can sample color, but I'm going to show you how to get the original color from the design in our next class. But today is just the introduction class, so I can't be wasting time on those ones. So as you can see, I have this color here. But you might be wondering, why am I not changing the font family inside each one of these? Because all the text on the page are using the same font family. So instead of you changing them one by one, you can actually change it directly inside this asterisk here. And this asterisk is going to apply to everything we have on the page. So I'm going to use a font that I have on my system, or which is the system UI here. And if I save it, you see that it will change the font. And it's not just one of them, it's changing everything. And that's the reason why that anytime you want to change font and the font is the same thing for everything, it's better you do it here or you do it inside the body. So if you do it inside the body too, it's going to work because every other content are inside the body. As you can see, it's still working, but normally I used to place it inside this side, which means it's going to affect every element on the page there. So but why is it, I put it inside the body, but why is it working for other elements? We're going to be talking about inherits in the other classes that will be coming there. But what is happening there is that some of these property, they are inheriting property from their parent. So if you do anything from the parent, they will take that same thing too automatically. You don't need to talk to them directly. But this A, if you look at the A, the color of that one is not changing. Even though I changed the color from the body, it did not change the color to that white. So the color is set to the white from body. So this one is using it, this one is using white, but the A is not using white. Why is it not using it? It's because the A by default doesn't inherit color from its parent. You have to talk to it directly before you can change its color. So here now, instead of me using this background, I can just use that black color so that it looks like the design that we have there. Because if you go back to the page, you see that there is a background color which is different, and if you look at it too, it looks like it has border, but I won't put any border there for now. So it's not black. I will just quickly change the color to something that is close to original color there, like this. This, let me see if I think it should be around here. You're going to see how to get the original color for all these things. Again, how do I remove that line under it? How do I remove that line under it? How do I remove that line under it? The line under it. How do I remove the line under it? Hello? How do I remove the line under it? Hello?
Yes, sir.
How do I remove the line under this A now? This line. No, look at the original stuff we have. There is nothing like a line there. So how do I remove that line? We talked about this one to under the text property. That's text decoration. This is text decoration. Don't forget, text decoration is what you can use to add a line, whether overline or underline. But what we want now is none. We don't want any line here. So how do I move the text to center? The text is supposed to be at the center of the box. What do I need to do to move the text? What do I need to do to move the text to the center?
I
Hello?
was not around for that class.
That's text align. We talk about this one now. Text
I
align.
was not around for that class.
Text align, by default it is left,
Okay.
and that's why you see that the content is on the left. I can move it to the right. You see that it will move it to the right, but the one we need right now is center, so that it's going to be like what you have on the page. Again too, all these things have border radius, so let me just give it border radius, which is going to be around that 4 pixels. So I will save it, and as you can see here, we are going to have it just like the way it is on the page. But this thing here, if I expand it, and as you can see, it looks like what we have there, even though the design is not that perfect, because this, I don't want to do a lot of things like the spacing here. I did not follow the spacing here because I did not arrange it according to where I supposed to arrange it, and that's the reason why you see that the spacing here is small, but our own, it's kind of a bigger, and it's because of the way it's being grouped there. So I did not group this one together because I don't want to do a lot of grouping and you start getting confused there. But we have a design that looks like what we have here. But without CSS, this thing don't going like this. Thing doesn't look like this by default when you are arranging your content. But when you start applying the CSS, that's where things on the page will start looking like the way you want them to be there. So tomorrow I'm going to dive into the flex property. I'm going to explain the flex property. Yeah, my battery. So I'm going to explain flex property first. Then after explaining the flex property, I will now go into the design that we need to work on tomorrow. First of all, I'm going to create a page, and that page I will use it to explain how flex property work in details, and from there we now use it to apply on a particular property first before we now dive into a design. So that's what I'm going to do tomorrow, so that you see how flex used to work. Because flex, you are going to use it a lot for a lot of design. So let me stop the video because I don't want this thing to off.